Yes, guys. Now that we are trying to cover our relevant standards which are related to your non-current assets, we discussed about IND AS 16, property, plant and equipment, IND AS 38, which was dealing with your intangible assets, 40 dealing with your investment property. We also discussed about 23, where the borrowing cost is eligible to be capitalized on these three assets along with inventory as well. Now, we come to the concept of discussion regarding a new addition as far as your syllabus is concerned from IND AS perspective. This standard does not have any corresponding standard under accounting standards, and this standard talks about your IND AS. You're talking about IND AS 105. What does your IND AS 105 talk about? Broadly, the name goes like this: non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operation. This part of discontinued operation, you keep it aside because I will only want to concentrate right now on the first part of the standard, non-current assets held for sale. Yes, there is an interaction and interrelation between these two parts, but let's first discuss about this non-current asset held for sale. First of all, do you need a separate standard for this? When do you say that a non-current asset is held for sale? In a genuine perspective, every asset has an end of its useful life, or somewhere during the useful life of the asset, I want to discharge this asset from active use, and today I am no longer intended to use this asset, but I intend to sell this asset and receive some economic benefit. My intention is to sell the asset and receive economic benefit. Now, until and unless the asset is sold, if this standard was not there, if there was no IND AS 105, until the asset was disposed of, even though the asset was not actively used, I would have still carried it as a non-current asset, either under IND AS 16 as property, plant and equipment, or investment property under IND AS 40, or intangible asset under IND AS 38. I would have continued to carry it under the same heads. But the problem here is, when the asset is not actively used, are you generating any operating profits out of those assets? No. Then your operating profits to your net assets as a ratio or non-current assets as a ratio would be absolutely deceiving if you include such assets as a part of these non-current assets. And primary perspective, let me put it like this, that a non-current asset is expected to be used in the enterprise, or benefit is expected to be derived by the enterprise for a period longer than 12 months. Correct? But in this case, you are not expecting to derive the benefit for more than 12 months. Here you are expecting to sell the asset. That means immediate disposal happens within 12 months where you will receive the benefit. Therefore, such assets which are disposed from its active use, and you intend to collect the money by sale of the asset, is no longer necessary to be classified as non-current. It has to be classified as a current asset which you are expecting to receive a benefit from sale of the asset within the next 12 months. Therefore, it definitely requires a new standard. Therefore, it definitely requires a new standard which should talk about a separate presentation of these non-current assets under current, and also requires a separate measurement as well. Because the measurement cannot be as according to the same method of your IND AS 16 or 38 or 40. If you remember the relevant paragraphs of derecognition of assets under property, plant and equipment, or under investment property, or under IND AS 38 intangible asset, you would remember that once an asset is discharged from its active use, depreciation is no longer calculated on the asset. Therefore, there is no amount of depreciation necessary to be charged or calculated on this particular asset. Then when depreciation is not charged, then the measurement has to change. You will have to measure it under some other respective standard. What is the standard which we will have to take it into consideration? This is a main part of discussion that we'll have regarding IND AS 105. What is the necessity? What is the objective of the standard? Like I told you, that these assets are no longer held for use. You want to make sure that these assets are discharged from active use and you recover the carrying value from sale of the asset. Correct? That is part one. The second part which I am talking about. The very important part is the presentation aspect. These non-current assets held for sale cannot have the same presentation format. They no longer can be considered as a non-current asset. They no longer can be considered as a non-current asset. Why they can't be considered as a non-current asset anymore? Because you are not intending to receive benefit from this asset for more than 12 months. Therefore, they have to be presented under current asset. This requires a definite change and which has to be given under the standard Ind AS 105. Third important necessity is measurement. You are no longer depreciating an asset once it gets classified under Ind AS 105 because it gets de-recognized from 16, 38 and 40 and should now be recognized under Ind AS 105. When you come across such logics where it gets recognized under Ind AS 105, you have to be thinking about what should be the appropriate measurement of these particular assets which are now recognized under Ind AS 105. That is the reason why Ind AS 105 becomes a very, very important standard from the perspective of the reclassification from non-current to current for presentation purpose and measurement of these assets subsequently after they are de-recognized from Ind AS 16, 38 or 40. Yeah. So I discussed about the objective. I'll have to talk about what is the standard talking about, how do you define these non-current assets held for sale, what is the measurement of it, and what is the presentation of it. Then we will move into the aspect of discontinued operation, which is also a necessary part of the standard. Here,